A Bridge Too Far is a 1977 epic war film that's based on a book by the same name from 1974. The movie was directed by Richard Attenborough, and the screenplay was done by William Goldman. The project was produced by Joseph Levine and Richard Levine. It starred an ensemble cast, including Dirk Bogarde, James Caan, Michael Caine, Sean Connery, Edward Fox, Elliot Gould, Gene Hackman, Anthony Hopkins, Hardy Kruger, Laurence Olivier, Ryan O'Neal, Robert Redford, Maximilian Schell, and Liv Ullmann. It's the true story of Operation Market Garden, the Allies' attempt in September of 1944 to hasten the end of World War II by driving through Belgium and Holland into Germany. The idea was for the U.S. airborne divisions to take the towns of Eindhoven and Nijmegen, and a British airborne division, reinforced by a Polish airborne brigade, to take the town of Arnhem. They would be reinforced in due course by land-based troops driving up from the British lines in the south. The key to all these operations were the bridges, because if the Germans held or blew them up, the paratroopers couldn't be relieved. Faulty intelligence, Allied high command conceit, and the stubbornness of German resistance would ensure that Arnhem was a bridge too far. Air filming was done in the first weeks of September 1976, which culminated into a series of airdrops with a total of about 1,000 men. Sufficient American tanks, jeeps, and trucks of the World War II vintage were found because many of the vehicles were being discarded from European military units, especially those from Greece and Turkey. The scenes around Arnhem Bridge were shot in Deventer, where a similar bridge was still available for shooting. Although a replica of the original road bridge in Arnhem existed, by the mid-1970s, modern urban development surrounded it, making it impossible to use as a setting for a 1940s city. Dirk Bogarde's portrayal of General Browning was highly controversial, and several friends of the late general suggested that if Browning was still alive in 1977, he would have sued the director and the screenwriter for libel. Bogarde took issue with the portrayal during filming because he knew Browning personally. Although Attenborough publicly took responsibility for this controversy, his relationship with Bogarde was never the same again. Browning's son said he believed that his father was made the fall guy for the failure of Operation Market Garden because the producers knew that they would have gotten too much flack if they went after Field Marshal Montgomery as the fall guy. Michael Caine's scripted line to order the column of tanks and armored cars into battle was "Forward, go, charge." Luckily for Caine, Lieutenant Vandeleur was on the set the day that they were shooting that scene, and he asked the lieutenant what the actual line was that he said. Vandeleur stated that all he said quietly into the microphone was, "Well, get a move on then," which is what Caine says in the movie. Caine also tells a story about the famous director Attenborough not telling him that a string of dummy tanks behind the scout car, which Caine was riding in, would be blown up. He did this so that Caine would have a realistic look of startlement when the scene was shot. And that's what he got. This was the first war movie in which actors were put through boot camp prior to filming. The director put many of the extras and soldiers through a mini boot camp, and then he housed them all in a barrack accommodation during the filming of the movie. Now, you see a British paratrooper twice in the takeoff scenes from England holding a chicken. This is a portrayal of the quartermaster of the 10th Paratroop Battalion, Lieutenant Joseph Glover, and his pet chicken Myrtle. Myrtle was originally liberated from a farm in England by Glover as a part of a bet to establish whether chickens can fly. She made several non-combat drops between July and September of 1944. Glover and Myrtle dropped in on Arnhem with the 4th Parachute Brigade in the 2nd airlift that occurred on September 18th, not the first that's portrayed in the movie. She was found dead on the 19th of September and buried with appropriate parachute wings. James Caan agreed to do this movie because of one scene, the scene in which he forces a reluctant Army surgeon to operate on one of his buddies at gunpoint. When the director came to Los Angeles to see him, he gave him a choice of several roles, but he chose that sergeant chiefly for that one scene. That same scene was played out in the TV show MASH at one time. It's almost identical. Hawkeye and his surgical team are forced to operate on someone that was brought in from the fighting by one of his buddies. Now, it's said that Anthony Hopkins was criticized at one point by a real colonel in the British military for running from house to house during the Battle of Arnhem. Hopkins was told by this colonel that a British officer would never have run, that he would have shown disdain for the enemy fire by walking from place to place. Hopkins said he tried to do that, but he just couldn't. Once the firing started, instincts took over, and he ran as fast as he could. Laurence Olivier showed up on the set one day prior to his filming wearing an old suit and a pair of battered black shoes. He informed the director that he had been gardening in these shoes for a month so that they would have the look that was right for the character that he was playing, a Dutch farmer and doctor who risked his own life to tend to the wounded. Sean Connery plays one of the biggest roles in this movie. He plays General Urquhart, but he was really angered to discover that Robert Redford, who had a much smaller role, was getting considerably more money. Connery then went on strike for a short while until his fees were adjusted to his satisfaction. Now, the reason that he was so mad about Robert Redford receiving more money than him was that Redford only worked for about 2 weeks on the movie and got about $2 million. Connery initially turned the movie down because he felt like it would be glorifying a military disaster. He later changed his mind after he read the screenplay. The movie has one of the biggest production costs in entire movie history, and the costs were continually rising during the making of the film. Word got out around the country that this was one of the most expensive movies ever made, and local businessmen started charging producer Levine insane prices for ordinary products. In order to combat this, the producer brought products in from Germany instead. Now, the special effects supervisor for the film was John Richardson. During the shooting of the movie, he was injured while driving his BMW in a car crash. His assistant and his girlfriend, Liz Moore, was killed in the accident. The incident happened just after midnight on Sunday, June 13th, 1976. Some of the conspiracy believers think that the accident was a result of a sinister curse on those that were involved in the making of the film The Omen from 1976. Richardson was an effects supervisor on this film as well. This head-on collision has somewhat bizarre coincidences with the movie of The Omen, though. His girlfriend was killed instantly because she was beheaded, echoing in real life what happened to the character of Jennings in The Omen. And then after the crash, Richardson was left alive, but he was completely dazed. When he got up after the collision and crawled out of the wreckage, he looked up and saw a signpost nearby pointing to the town of Omen, spelled almost identical to the movie name. It just had an additional M in it. This stated that it was 20 kilometers away. Who believes this stuff? I don't know. A lot of people do. I don't, but I do find it interesting in a more of a connect the dots type way. The critics, when viewing the film, agreed that this movie was impressively staged and historically accurate. I think it's a fun movie to watch with a cast of stars that's endless. Take a look back at this massive production. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.